Hi everyone, and welcome back to Liz Sews, and the next video in my Make It Your Own series, where I show you how to take an already well-fitting pattern and alter the style line so you get something that looks completely different and unique. Today's tutorial is linked to several bras that I created as part of my November Inspired By month. I was trying to recreate a bra pattern that was originally posted by Emerald Erin Sews. I'd love for you guys to check out Emerald Erin Sews on Instagram, and I've linked her down in the description box below because I always get tons of ideas from her. In today's video, I'll be going over how I went about drafting that 5-piece cup based off of Emerald Erin's Black Beauty bra pattern. I absolutely love the Black Beauty bra pattern, and it is the basis of a lot of my pattern manipulations. I will not be including any construction notes in today's video. We're solely looking at making the pattern itself. If you'd like to see how these bras turned out, make sure you check out my November Makes video, which I've linked up in the iCards above, so you can see the finished project. And make sure that you're subscribed to my channel because throughout the month of December, I will be having project logs that go into a little bit more detail on the construction of these bras. For this pattern manipulation, you will need your cut pieces, tape, marking utensil, scissors, curved and straight edged rulers, tracing paper. Let's get started. So this pattern manipulation, I'm doing it from the Black Beauty bra. It's very similar in style lines to the Inspiration bras, and so I think it makes the most sense to use. The first thing that I'm going to do is work on combining the upper and lower cut pieces here. So the way I'm going to do that is getting rid of my seam allowance on my lower cut piece on the outer edge, like so. Once that seam allowance is removed, I can make it a lot easier for me to butt these two up. So I want to butt the cut edge of my lower cut piece with the seam allowance line marked on my upper cut piece here. Once that's aligned, I'm going to tape this into place, like so. Now I'm going to draw in my seamed power bar. So unlike the original Black Beauty pattern, this power bar is actually seamed into the cup. The first thing I want to do, I'm kind of going to cheat and utilize the original power bar just to give me an idea of my strap attachment. However, I am going to make mine a little bit longer. That way I have extra room. I just like the look of it attaching a little bit further up onto the bra. So I've just aligned this underarm edge of my power bar with my cut pieces, and I'm going to utilize that to draw in my strap attachment. And like I said, I'm going to make mine extend just a little bit further. There's no reason to do this other than just a stylistic choice. And now I need to determine what my strap width is going to be. This distance right here is going to be taken up using my Pico elastic, but my strap distance should meet, or the hardware I'm using on my strap should be the same width as the strap attachment point. So I'm probably going to use 1/2 inch straps. That is my preference. So I just want to make sure that I have a line that is 1/2 inch over, and that will give me a good idea of how wide my strap attachment point needs to be. And lastly, I'm just going to draw a straight line to finish out that edge here. Now, I'm going to have to fold over my strap attachment, so I'm going to leave myself an extra 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's going to be material that's folded over through my ring. And so I'm going to add that 1/4 inch seam allowance on the top there. And now I need to put in the scoop of my power bar. So when I'm looking at my upper and lower cut piece here, there is a point where those two seam lines start to diverge or start to move apart. So I'm just gonna do a little tick mark on there. I know that I don't want my power bar to go any further into the cut piece here. It can cross at this point or anywhere along this edge where the two seams are meeting up perfectly. Looking at the inspiration photo, this power bar is rather skinny, so I think I'm not going to go through that point exactly. I think I'm gonna go in just a little bit. Yeah, like this. That looks pretty good. So I'm gonna attach my seam allowance point down here. I'm gonna draw in my scoop and my power bar. And then once I get to my strap attachment point, I think I just want a straight line from my 1/2 inch mark up here to where it attaches down here. I can also copy in the wireline curve on this side of the bra. Then lastly, I'm just putting my seam allowances in because I find it's always helpful to have my seam allowances drawn in down the road, so I know for sure that they're included into the pattern. So this is what my power bar piece looks like now. I also want to draw in my seam allowances on this arc as well. As I had mentioned, this is going to connect or seam into the bra piece itself. Actually, before I do that, I do want to make sure that I'm marking things. I want to give myself a notch point. So I give myself a notch there where the upper cut piece interacts, and I'm also going to give myself a notch on my power bar here where the upper and lower intersect. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw in my seam allowance on this arc edge over here. This portion will attach to the rest of the bra cut pattern pieces over here, and I'm going to cut 2 of these so that I can finish this edge as well. So just adding my 1/4 cup or 1/4 inch seam allowance all along this outer edge. So the ruler that I'm using here comes from Clover. I'm not sponsored, I just find these rulers super, super helpful when I'm adding 1/4 inch seam allowances, especially on curved edges. So I have linked them down in the description box below. Once you get to the bit over here, you can just go ahead and extend it out until they meet. It's not terribly important what this looks like because this is where it's going to end on the bra. So now we have that outer piece done. So the next step is figuring out the rest of the bra itself. And at this point, I need to copy over what I've already taken out with my power bar. I'm going to use a light table probably, and I'm just going to come on over to this and sketch in that curve that I have from my power bar below. So I'm going to go to my light table and figure that out. Okay, so I've drawn in that arc here. Note that that arc is drawn from the actual sewn line and not the edge of the cut fabric piece. So don't include your seam allowances when you're marking that arc in. Now that I've got the arc marked in, I can go ahead and cut it off. So this upper cut piece will attach right here. I don't need to make any other adjustments to it other than adding a seam allowance onto this cut edge here, because before you weren't attaching fabric to fabric. Take a little scrap of paper, my power bar away. Just gonna take a little scrap of paper and tape it on. So, and just draw in my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So upper cut piece is done and the power bar piece is done. Now we need to go to the last 3 pieces. So for this one, I am going to get rid of all of the rest of my seam allowances on here because I'm just going to add them all back in later. It's easier to either add them all at once or have them already included, but it's kind of hard to remember which ones have it and which ones don't if it's both. So now I've removed all of my seam allowances from my remaining lower cut piece, and I'm going to start drawing in my lines. So I want this to be split into 3 cut pieces, and I want the center cut piece to sort of straddle my apex point here. So I'm just going to sketch in, let's see, 2 lines there. Let's do there and there. And again, I want to straddle this sort of like lower apex point. So I'm just going to sketch in places where I think it should meet, and I'm going to just draw straight lines. So once I've drawn my straight lines in, I'm going to cut this into 3 separate pattern pieces. So now I have my 3 lower cut pattern pieces. I'm going to go ahead and add my seam allowances onto these. And because I've taken seam allowances off everywhere, that means I do need to add my 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. Another thing I'm going to do, just to have this have a little bit rounder of an appearance, is I'm going to bow out these straight edges on either side. Not by a lot, but I'll show you what I mean when I bring up the tracing paper. So one thing that I should mention before we start tracing these around is we're going to change up our directions of stretch from what was originally on the cut piece. So when this was one cut piece, the stretch is going this way. I want to give this bra a little bit more lift, and so I want my directions of greatest stretch from the middle of the cut piece towards the apex. So I've aligned these where they were before I cut them out. I'm going to find the middle of this piece right here is going to be like there-ish. The middle of this piece was my apex point, or the middle of this piece was that notch line, and then the middle of this piece is sort of like around there. So the middle of that arc of that individual piece. And then when I'm drawing in my stretch lines, I want to go from that midpoint to the apex of the cup in total. So I lay my ruler connecting that midpoint to my apex, and this is going to be the direction of greatest stretch on this pattern piece. And on this pattern piece over here, again, I'm going to find that midpoint and lay my ruler between the midpoint and the apex, and this is going to be my greatest stretch on this pattern piece. So both of these are going to move towards this way, and on my center pattern piece I'm going to actually move my dogs almost parallel or perpendicular, and it's going to go up and down like this. So these two are in towards the center, and this one's going straight up and down. So now I can take this over to my tracing paper and start adding in my seam allowances. So the first guy, the cross cup seam and the wire line edge, I just want to copy exactly over, like so. So this is my innermost cut piece right now. And then once you do that, you want to add on your 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then, like I said, I don't want this to be a straight edge. I want it to bow out just slightly, just an ever so slight curve, and that's going to give me a little bit rounder of a cut piece. If you've ever done an alteration where you've split the lower cup, this is exactly, just to get more room, this is what you would do. So I'm going to bow it out just slightly so it's not exactly lined up with that straight cut line on my pattern piece. And again, add my 1/4 inch seam allowance. Don't forget to transfer over your new dogs, and this is going to be my inner piece. The other thing I like to call them is ABC, so I find it's easier for me to just mark it ABC rather than inner, middle, and outer. So here's the first one. Now I'm going to do my middle piece. I want to copy my cross cup seam edge and my lower edge. I don't want to make any changes to those. And I just want to copy them and then add my seam allowance, my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm not going to worry about transferring over my notch mark up here. I'm going to put new notch marks at just where these intersect, but I am going to keep my notch mark down here. And just like we did for the inner cut piece here, I want to bow out these straight edges ever so slightly, just to give me a slightly rounder cup appearance. So I'm going to bow it out, And then I'm going to add my 1/4 inch seam allowance on there. And then the last one we need to do is the outer lower cup. And this one, I'm sure that you will know exactly what I'm doing. I'm going to copy over exactly on the cross cup seam and add my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to copy over exactly on my wire line. Actually, this is no longer the wire line. This is where it connects to the power bar. I'm going to do that. And then add my seam allowance. Again, sticking with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. And then when I get to the straight edge, I'm going to connect my point here to my point here, but letting it bow out ever so slightly so that it's not a straight edge anymore. And then adding my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So here we have the finished pattern. We have our lower A, B, and C cup pieces. I have this upper cup piece here and this seamed in power bar. I'm going to be cutting all of these out in Bra Tool, and I actually want my direction of greatest stretch opposing. So for every time I have my stretch going this way, I'm also going to cut a second layer where my stretch goes this way. That way I have a really stable bra. The only other thing I can do at this point in time, it might be helpful to add some notch marks in just for making things easier. So instead of this notch mark up here, I am going to walk my seam here, so overlapping my seam point on my lower cup piece with my upper cup piece, and I'm going to notch mark there. I'm not going to use this one anymore. And again, walking my curve with these pieces, this notch is going to go right there. So that way, when I'm combining my lower to my upper, I have where those intersection points happen. And of course, we already added our notch marks intersections for the top right here and this section right there. Hope you guys have enjoyed this tutorial on modifying the Black Beauty bra stylistically into this sort of different 5-piece cup modification. Stay tuned this month as there will be project logs that go over the 2 bras that are utilizing this manipulated pattern. I'll see everyone next time. Take care.